cheese. All right, welcome back to That's Some Cheese, part of the Vendetta Sports Podcast Network. Today is Wednesday morning here, May 20th. We are going to be talking to our Australian correspondent, Jared Prosser, doing our part 2 of the Last Dance documentary review. Jared, how's it going?
Doing well, man. I'm prepared. I've been wearing berets backwards, oversized banana-coloured suits, listening to unreleased Kenny Lattimore. Preparation of a champion, apparently.
I don't even know who that is, but I've been a mess. We were supposed to do this yesterday, but we got it together, so we're recording this today. First thing I wanted to start here with is the Bulls are just so entertaining to me. I could have watched a 30-part documentary on this, but is it the greatest dynasty in NBA history? Is that 72-win team the best team? Because maybe prior to this, I think I would have leaned to Golden State, but I don't know really where to go because it just doesn't feel like Golden State would have been able to match up with certain players. Like, who's their answer? Like, Rodman, I think, was a better Draymond Green. So it's tough for me to really pick.
Well, we can break it down into two parts. The best dynasty, they're definitely not. A dynasty is only comparable to the teams they played against. So you have to say that it's the Celtics in the 60s. You know, between I think it's 57 and 69, they won 11 of 13. And of the two they didn't win, it was a conference finals and a finals loss. So, you know, top 4 in the league for 13 straight years is pretty remarkable. And we will never see it again. I
just feel like Bill Russell was playing against like 10-year-olds or something. There's no other explanation for it.
He was also playing against Wilt.
Yeah.
And against Baylor and against West and Robertson and, you know, Hal Greer and all these guys. You know, he wasn't, like, the depth wasn't the same. There's no doubt about that. Even though there were less teams, the depth wasn't the same. But he was still playing against some really, really good basketballers. So, and again, like I said, you can't, it's always difficult to compare eras. It's really tough to say, well, how would this team have gone in this era? They can really only be compared against their competition. And as good as the Bulls were, you know, the Celtics, as great as the Bulls were, good's underselling it massively. The Celtics is the best dynasty. As far as the best team, that Bulls team probably was, but there's so many good arguments for so many other teams. You could say the 73-win Warriors if they won the title, but at the same time, they didn't win the title. And the 2017 team, despite a lesser record, was probably better because they added KD. You know, the 72 Lakers, five Hall of Famers on that team, 33-game winning streak. Everybody talks about the 86 Lakers, and if I can channel Game of Zones here and the best Bill Russell, it's the greatest team in Bostonia basketball history. So, you know, there's so many teams that can be in that conversation. It's almost like the Jordan, LeBron, Kareem argument that we were talking about on the last pod. No matter what argument you make, you're probably right. Doesn't matter which team you think is the best team or which player you think is the best player. There is an argument for all of those. So it's very much a subjective thing.
I want to go back to my hero, Dennis Rodman, who you sort of found out on the last episode, but
yeah, I'm still disturbed by that.
Say whatever you want about that guy. He showed up. He always came to play. Like, whether he was going to play WWE or just, you know, fleeing to Vegas, the guy always came to play, and he always played defense. He always got his rebounds, and he was always a team player. I think he comes off really well in this documentary. And not to mention the fact, what's a better picture than holding the trophy next to Carmen Electra? Does it get any higher than that?
It was lovely to see Carmen back on our screens again. Yeah, that has to be said. We can't completely talk about saying that. We were talking about the Bulls dynasty, the Celtics dynasty will never happen again. Rodman will never happen again. In this day and age, you just won't get someone who takes off to Vegas for 3 days or decides that he's going to smash people over the head with a chair randomly in the middle of the finals. It just wouldn't happen. But it's a weird thing in Rodman's makeup that he almost, because he would get bored so easily, it's almost like he needed to do something different, like taking off from the team randomly, so that he could come back and feel an obligation to play hard and therefore put in 100% again for the team. It's a really weird... Sigmund Freud would have a field day with Rodman. But I almost think he needed those events to blow off steam to refocus him for basketball. So when you say, he always brings it, and I won't say he always did, but he almost always brought it. But if he was someone who was focused on basketball all of the time, I think he would have got bored. I think he would have been one of those guys that flamed out early, that rebelled against the system so much that nobody would have wanted him, despite the obvious talent. So in a weird way, as much as you hear Costas on the telecast talking about his freak sideshow behaviour off the court.
I can't stand Bob Costas. He's so boring.
He's just very flat, isn't
yes.
he? You do see the difference. And look, we all know why Marv wasn't on the telecast that year, and we won't go into that for legal reasons. But there's such a drop-off to Costas. He's not a bad commentator per se.
He's not bad. He's just boring.
Yeah, he's just not as good as the very best ones that you would expect in an NBA final. But yeah, Rodman... Yeah, I think Rodman needed... the more I've watched it, and I've rewatched that Rodman 30-30 since we last potted, and I've come to the conclusion that he needed to have those let-off steam events to refocus him for basketball, that he wouldn't have been half the player if he didn't get to essentially act up every now and again.
I love that guy. Is there anything that's even close to him today? Because I think even Draymond Green, I don't think it's really fair. I think the closest thing actually is Marcus Smart, but he's not really as crazy, but he dives on the loose floor. He guards everybody. He really rebounds well for his position. I think he's the only thing that's even 10% close.
As far as the type of player, probably Smart, except that Smart, and I
smaller.
guess it's the nature of the game, Smart does shoot.
Yeah.
But as far as the personality, Draymond is the closest we've got. Because he's almost someone who needs to let off steam, whether it's pissing off Steve Kerr or yelling at KD or, side-eyeing Doc Rivers or whatever he does. Yeah, he's almost someone who needs to needs to be non-conformist so that he can conform. So, yeah, I think Draymond's probably the closest. I can't think of anybody else who's similar, to be honest.
Yeah,
there's probably something with this.
I don't really... I know this is crazy, but I feel like those guys deserve more credit than they get. I don't understand the people that just passionately hate Draymond because he's important. There's not enough balls to go around. So that third guy has to do that kind of stuff.
And he defensively, I think his playmaking is a little bit overrated.
Yeah.
But defensively, he is a savant. He is just such a gifted defender. He's the sort of guy that, yes, he's strong, he's stout, the low center of gravity for his position. He's got good lateral mobility, but he just sees stuff before it develops. Yeah, he's an absolute genius on the defensive end of the floor. So he is perfect, absolutely perfect for that Golden State team, just like Rodman was perfect for the Pistons and the Bulls.
I think I want to go to this. The Steve Kerr part was actually more impressive than I thought it would be. I thought it was really entertaining. Just the evolution of him becoming John Paxson. And I thought of this the other day. If you had to relive your career through the eyes of one of those Bulls players, it might be Steve Kerr. He's had a hell of a career. I posed this question in the chat. Would you rather be him or Bob Horry? Honestly, if you include the coaching, I think I'd rather be Steve Kerr. How many rings does that guy have?
Well, that's it. It's like when I saw that in the chat, I looked at it as just a playing career, and I'd shade it towards Ori. But at the same time, against expectations, one was the 11th pick, one was the second rounder. Kerr outperformed his draft position a lot more than Ori did. But if you take into account A, the coaching, B, his time as a GM, which wasn't great, admittedly, and his Steve Kerr's time in the broadcast booth, which was excellent. He has become a basketball icon. For a guy that was, never really a starting quality player, he has become synonymous with the game because he's worked well in so many different areas of the game now. He'd never be a Hall of Famer as a player, but he will make the Hall of Fame one day simply because of his overall contributions to the game.
I agree. For a guy that just didn't really have that much talent, the way we look at him is incredible to me.
Oh, yeah. And look, there's a little bit of riding the right coattails in that he was with the Bulls for the 3P. He was with the Spurs at the right time. But it's not like he was the 11th or 12th man on those teams. He was a role player, but he was a contributing role player. He wasn't some scrub.
Next, I want to dive into, I think the best part of the documentary is the iPad. When the director shows Jordan the iPad and he just reacts to it. I could watch those all day. Him laughing at Gary Payton is something that will live on forever.
Oh, that's the best meme out of the entire 10 episodes. But every single time the interviewer or a producer handed Jordan an iPad, you sit up and you move to the edge of your seat because you know that something good is about to appear on your telly. It's such a brilliant trick that they've done to get those live reactions out of people. And for a guy like Jordan, who is just so stupidly competitive, you give him even the slightest slight, and his instant reaction is just glorious. So, it was definitely the best part of the whole thing, even down to the end of the last episode where they talk about Reinsdorf breaking up the team, and you see Jordan's eyes light up. Reinsdorf? Reinsdorf said something? Yeah, even at the very end, that iPad was still delivering. It was the star of the documentary for me.
I want to jump into the list of his grudges here, because I think that's the sort of thing that separates MJ just from everybody else. He always created enemies.
Are we taking this pod into like a third and fourth episode just to cover all the grudges?
I don't know. I just find it so fascinating because I'm kind of like this. I'm just like sick in the head a little bit. I don't let things go, and I'll create enemies out of anything. But I just find what MJ did, because I don't feel like a ton of players have this killer mentality. Like Kevin Garnett, to me, is the last guy who really went out there and like wanted to kill somebody. I don't think anybody else has really had that mentality MJ does, and I find it so fascinating.
It's a you've got that mentality, but they don't have a tenth of Jordan's talent, and that's the thing with Jordan. He was the perfect combination of physical talent and all of the different elements of mentality that go into an elite athlete. The ability to train hard, the ability to push through pain, to find motivation, to stay focused in the moment. He's the perfect combination of all of that. There's been guys who have Jordan's athleticism, and without knowing who, there would be guys that have had one or multiple of Jordan's mental traits, but nobody's packaged them like MJ did. And, those grudges, Paula Bradford Smith, look, he's a name that nobody, even people who watched the NBA closely like I did at that stage, nobody had remembered LaBradford Smith until this thing came up. And he's come up from because of something he didn't say. The poor kid got absolutely pile-drived by Jordan for something he didn't do. At least with Brian Russell, that was such a great moment in, I think, It was episode 9 where Jordan talks about going into the Bulls practice facility to see Malone and Stockton. And Brian Russell, as a rookie, comes up to him and goes, "Why'd you quit? Why'd you quit? I could guard your ass." And straight away, you just see this look come over Jordan. What do you say? He was on my list. And you're just thinking, Brian, shut up. Don't stop it. Just stop talking, please. I mean, he has only himself to blame. LeBradford Smith, he's looking around going, "What just hit me?" No idea what he's done wrong. Poor fella.
I want to jump into, because we always bang on Charles Barkley because he didn't win a ring. But I guess, the problem is he didn't win a ring because Michael Jordan just won all of them. So
he's not on an island.
My question is, which teams, if Michael Jordan's Bulls didn't exist, would have rings? Because there's a lot of good teams that he beat.
Well, you could say the easy answer would be all of the teams he beat in the finals. But assuming that another champion team came up, or let's do an exercise. Let's assume that Jordan went to the Blazers and that somehow Drexler ended up on the Bulls. So you've still got a superstar at the 2, but you've got, for want of a better way to put it, an ordinary run-of-the-mill superstar rather than the super-duper megastar. So I think the Bulls would have won in 91 because the Lakers were old and injured. You take that, the Blazers team in 92 with Jordan instead of Drexler, and the Blazers would have won. The Suns probably would have won. I don't know if the Sonics would have. It would have been interesting, though. It would have been a close series. And I think Utah gets 1, maybe 2. So Jordan really was the difference in those series. I mean, we saw it in the last couple of episodes that when Pippen was injured or Rodman was out of touch or Kerr wasn't hitting his shots, it was Jordan that found a way. So you could theoretically say that the Bulls might have won 1 or 2 of those 6 without him. I think the Suns and the Jazz would have won a title each, I'd say, as a minimum.
I think the sneaky pick that I keep going back to is he might have just made Shaq leave the Magic. I think that Magic team might have had one.
It's a tough one because you don't, Penny's knees weren't great. And as soon as his knees went, he was half the player that he was. He just was not the same. And I don't necessarily think MJ made Shaq leave the Bulls. I think the bright Hollywood lights made him leave. This is a guy who wanted to be a multimedia person. He wanted to release, as it turned out, really crappy rap record and even shittier movies. So, he wanted to be that all-encompassing star, and he felt that he could do that in LA as opposed to Orlando, which is fair enough, probably.
I just can't believe that Magic team during the prime of Penny and Shaq didn't win one.
If they'd stayed together, they might have. The other thing is you'd have to somehow repair Nick Anderson's head after those 4 missed free throws. He was such a good player.
That was their shot right there that year.
Oh, absolutely. That was the one. And, Olajuwon just, man, he just tore Shaq apart, and the rest of the team. You could tell it was a young team who were deer in the headlights against an old team who had been there before. There was a bunch of those guys who were there for the 86 run as well. So they had been in the finals before. Even Drexler Drexler was in the second year, wasn't he? He was 95, so he wasn't in that first one. But they still had, I just thought they had, I think Kenny Smith was still there at that stage. They had good veteran players who weren't overawed in the
Sam
moment.
Cassell, was he there, right? I think.
He was, but he was a rookie. He would have been a rookie. But again, even as a rookie, Sam Cassell has never been overawed by any moment. I just had a quick thought on a team that might have won a title if MJ's Bulls didn't exist as they were. The Pacers. That 98 Pacers team was superb. More than I think about it, if they had made the finals, I think they probably could have beaten Utah.
Yeah, that's possible. I hate Jalen Rose so much. Every time I see his face, I want to turn the TV. I can't stand him on ESPN.
Oh, man. Jalen's great. I love Jalen. He's excellent. Can't sing.
How about we can jump into the Utah series here? What's with the inbred fans that are trying to get Jordan sick?
I think that has been blown up so much. I really
I'm just messing with
you. Yeah, look, I am a Utah fan, but I'm not from Salt Lake.
You don't want to be.
I'm not from the States. I'm not Mormon. Like, my only tie to Utah is the team. But look, there's a few things on this. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. Even today, there was a story that came out from the guy who allegedly made the pizza, and he said there were 2 of us that delivered it, but there was another guy who came from the hotel, so there were 3 there. But even if it was 5 guys, it's Salt Lake City. It's not a big place. The NBA Finals are on. I can guarantee that every man and his dog knew which hotel the Bulls were staying at. So if they get a call at 10:30 at night for a pizza to that hotel, even if it's not delivering to Jordan's room, it might be Pippen's or Rodman's or Longley's or Harper's. Yeah, they're going to get to see close up a Chicago Bull. So, of course, he's sitting there going, hey, everyone, we're shutting the shop once we make this pizza. We're all jumping in the car and we're going to the Park City or the Plaza Hotel or whatever it was called, for the chance to get close up and brag to their mates as they got close up to one of the Bulls. As far as the pizza itself, Jason, how do you say his surname, the producer? Jason Hare? Jason Hare?
I have no idea. I haven't figured it out.
I'm just going to call him Jason Hare, and if by chance he's listening to this pod and I've got it wrong, I apologise profusely. But he's come out in an interview and said it wasn't in the documentary, it was cut. But Jordan actually spat on the pizza to make sure no one else would eat it. Again, the competitiveness. No one else is eating my pizza. But, it's this pizza was ordered at like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and apparently it was the only place that was open in all of Salt Lake. I'm thinking it's not exactly a 5-star restaurant. So there's every chance that the meat that was there, that they did everything in good faith, and the ingredients were just crap.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's made one of the best stories of, well, it's NBA folklore, the flu game, even though it's not the flu. But yeah, I honestly, I just don't think that it was deliberately done. I think it's just an unfortunate turn of events.
It definitely helped his legacy out. You look at LeBron, he can't even play a finals game with cramps.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
How about let's get to some of the topics that you have on your list. You can kind of lead the way with what you got here.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, there's so much that I love about this documentary series. First and foremost is that iPad. I mean, if that doesn't win like a Golden Globe or an Emmy for Best Supporting Actor, there'll never be a chance for an inanimate object to win again. It was the star. The behind-the-scenes footage that we were promised, you hear this a lot. There's going to be behind-the-scenes footage and rare footage and never before seen. And it turns out that it might be 3 or 4 seconds of something over 2 hours. This documentary came through in that regard. All of the golfing stuff, the training, the Dream Team games, the Space Jam game, all of the banter in the locker rooms or the hotels or in the corridor of the stadium. This was one of those documentaries that promised a lot as far as we're going to give you a fly-on-the-wall view to what these guys get up to. And it really came through.
Yeah, I feel like what was it? Jordan's first title after coming back from baseball, when he's crying on the floor. I feel like I've never seen the audio of that.
No, I had seen a few seconds of that video, but there was no context to it. I didn't know when it was outside of he just won a title somewhere. but I had no idea what year it was. There was no audio. But to hear him just howling in anguish on the floor, that was like that made me sit up and just stop. It was really, really difficult to watch that, even 20 plus years later. And clearly we don't know the man personally, but you felt for him. You couldn't help but feel for him.
Totally agree. I love the behind the scenes stuff. I love the baseball stuff too.
Oh, of course, yeah. To me, that was quite interesting. I don't really follow baseball, but I know a certain amount of names within the sport, and I had no idea that Terry Francona was his minor league manager.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like if Rodman was playing in the CBA and Greg Popovich was his CBA coach or something.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah,
I feel like he does get a bad rap for his baseball career. I don't feel like people understand how hard it is to hit 200 after not playing for like, what was it, 12 years or whatever. That's like impossible.
yeah. It would have been 14 years, I think they said, which would make sense. He would have probably given it up as a junior or a senior in high school, and he was 31, I think, when he started baseball.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else you got?
I'll skip around my order a bit because we're talking about, I guess, the human side of Jordan. Yes, this probably wasn't as warts and all as some would have hoped, but considering that Jordan was the skeleton key to unlock this vault, you always knew that you wouldn't get every single bad angle on him, every single controversy. But at the same time, I'm glad they didn't try to hide the gambling stuff. They at least addressed it in reasonable depth. Same with the bullying side of things. They did show that, yes, he could be a prick to his teammates. I loved seeing him, as we mentioned, on the floor after that victory over Seattle, where you just saw this outpouring of emotion. I really loved when he was being interviewed, I think it was at the end of episode 7, where he's explaining that winning is such a powerful thing to him, and that everything he does to his teammates is to see who can take the pressure, who's going to be in that foxhole with him, and that if you don't make it, he's got no need for you. And he was getting really emotional explaining that 20 years after he'd played for the Bulls, 15 years after he'd retired, he still gets emotional talking about that. And that made me think that he completely understands what he does to his teammates, and it does hurt him that a lot of people won't like him because of it. He does feel that he feels like he does let people down in that regard, that he could be more friendly with them. But at the same time, that feeling gets overpowered by the pathological need to win. So you could almost see the complexity in him, the conflict within him coming out in that 30 seconds to a minute that he had that monologue. That was really eye-opening to me.
I feel like he came off really well during that portion that we were talking about. Like,
Yeah.
just because I think they were showing the practice clips in there too. How many teams actually like practice now? These teams don't practice like they did back then.
No, but there was nowhere near as much sports science either. The guys played through so many injuries, but those guys also, unless they were absolute freaks of nature, they were done by the time they were 33, 34. Or you end up with guys like Walton or McHale or Brad Doherty who get injured and are never the same. It's a different era, not of just the way the game's played, but also all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Something else I loved, you touched on it before with the backstory for Kerr. I knew a fair bit about Kerr's backstory. I knew a bit about Rodman's, of course, MJ's, but I didn't know a lot about Scottie Pippen's, and outside of the CBA stuff and the time playing for the Knicks, I really didn't know much about Phil Jackson. So I had no idea about was it Cuba or Puerto Rico, wherever he was coaching. I had no idea about his, very strict fundamentalist upbringing. And I didn't know Rodman lived on the streets. It was really interesting learning some of the backstories to those guys. I've always considered Phil Jackson to be almost different for the sake of being different. But after seeing his backstory, I actually think that it makes more sense the way he is. The different way that he looks at the world makes a lot more sense after you see his upbringing.
I actually find this insane that I don't feel like stuff like this will happen again. What, Dennis Rodman was basically like a walk-on at his college, and Scottie Pippen was a manager and nobody was offering him things. Like, I don't feel like that will ever happen again. I don't know if it's because the scouting has gotten better or if it's because like those players would never have an opportunity now. But it feels like that sort of like, oh, the guy's a manager and now he's like our best player. That's not happening.
Yeah, going from equipment manager to superstar point guard to superstar power forward in the space of 2 years is like, if you put that script to a Disney movie, you'd sit there and go, this is the stupidest movie I've ever seen. This will never happen. But it actually did. And I think you're right. The scouting systems are so much more complex and so much deeper now. And that's due to the technology. You can sit there and video some kid in the middle of Nebraska on your phone, and within 2 minutes, a scout in New York's got it. There's just no way that people can fly under the radar nearly as much these days. So that, I hadn't thought of it until this moment, but one of Krause's strengths, as we mentioned on the last pod, was his scouting background. He was able to find these gems and pick them out before other people did. And, would Krause have been nearly as successful these days? Was his advantage as a scout? I guess, did everybody catch up to that?
Yeah, I think I could be wrong on this, but I saw that like he was maybe the only guy that actually went overseas to watch Tony Kukoc, that nobody actually saw him in person except for him.
Yeah, that's the story, that there was, some teams might have had some advanced scouting in Europe or anything like that, but as far as I know, and as far as everything I've read, Krause was the only GM or direct power broker in a front office that went over to watch him. And that's going to have an effect on you too. You're going to sit there and go, yeah, I'll shut every other, if you want me, nobody else has bothered to come out to my war-torn country, I'll shut everything down and, yeah, I'll come over to you guys for sure.
How do you think Scotty was portrayed in the documentary? Because I read things that he wasn't happy with his portrayal, but I think it was pretty accurate for what I remembered. And they kind of left out the gun thing and the DUI charges.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about those. Yeah.
So I feel like, if anything, they kind of did him a solid there.
Yeah, look, I was really surprised to read that Pippen was upset at how he's come across. I think he's come across really, really well. Like, I think he's one of the winners of the documentary. They covered off the migraine thing. They covered off the Game 3 in 94. They covered off him gutting it out with his back as a balance to that. But even through the high-profile blunders, he was shown to be a beloved teammate and an all-time great of the game. Like, I think they really covered him well. And that voice, wow.
He's got a great voice.
Like, oh, man, I want Apple, if anyone from Apple's listening, do a Scottie Pippen Siri. I want to sit there and go, hey, Siri, and Scottie Pippen answers for me. If Scottie Pippen read out the phone book when I was going to sleep, I would sleep like a baby. It's such a soothing voice.
What else you got on your list?
I think that the objectivity, I touched on this before, but the objectivity did suffer a little bit. You've heard Horace Grant come out in the last 24 hours or so and get really nasty about the whole, what was Sam Smith's book? The Jordan Rules. About the whole Jordan Rules affair, about him being a snitch. But again, this is MJ's documentary. It's not Horace Grant's documentary. So the truth is going to be 80% skewed towards Jordan. The truth in quotation marks.
I feel like they did include Horace Grant's quote in there, though.
They did, but at the same time, they almost did it. I think they almost did it out of an obligation, really. I think Grant came across all right, but there was maybe 2 or 3 seconds of Grant saying, "No, it wasn't me," against a lot of Jordan saying, "It has to be Horace. It has to be Horace. It has to be Horace." I think Jerry Krause was shat on from a great height way too much. Way too much. They didn't like him. Jordan didn't like him. Pippen didn't like him. As far as the contract side of it, Krause offers the contracts that he can get by his owner. He's not offering a contract and having the player sign it and then taking it to Reinsdorf. Before anything's offered, Reinsdorf signs off on it. So you can't necessarily blame Krause for some of the contracts. You can blame him for being a little bit of an asshole, but at the same time, he did not deserve the treatment that he got from them at the time, and he certainly didn't deserve to be portrayed as he was until the little bit of tokenism at the end from Pippen saying he was a great GM. You mentioned Gary Payton before. I thought he was reduced, or his defense was reduced to essentially meme status. Payton, I remember those finals, Trey, and Payton really did tighten up that series. He played absolutely magnificent defense on Jordan. And Jordan, being Jordan, couldn't even 20-odd years later accept that, and it's become a meme. That's not fair to Payton. Drexler became an afterthought, and he was really good in those finals. MJ was better, without a doubt, but Drexler was still really good in those 92 finals. Now, you mentioned the 98 finals quickly, but we only got onto the Pizzagate. I'm loath to do it because it's going to bring up some really bad memories for me, but did you want to cover some of the observations from the games?
Yeah. I don't know if this is kind of weird, but John Stockton, he's got to chill out with the chest hair a little bit. A little too much.
It's how he sticks to his defender. It's like Velcro.
Yeah, let's jump into it. What do you got?
I was really hoping you'd say no to this bit. I'd actually forgotten. Everybody knows that Pippen had been carrying it back for a few years, and that it did go in and out. It's like any back injury. It's like my back injury. Sometimes you get on the court and it's loose as hell and you're fine. Other times you feel like you're a 63-year-old man. I'd forgotten about how bad his back was in Game 6. It had just completely escaped my memory that he hurt it on the very first play and that he was essentially done for the game. I'd completely forgotten about that.
I want to actually ask you about Jerry Sloan because I don't, like, I was really little back then and I didn't get into, like, the X's and O's and how the coach was having an impact on the game, but you're going to tell me this guy didn't know that MJ was sick? I don't buy it.
Oh, he knew. He absolutely knew. Jerry Sloan, and again, anyone who's listening from Utah, I hope old Uncle Jerry's doing well. He's not particularly healthy at the moment, so I hope he's doing okay. But Sloan had the driest sense of humour, the absolute driest sense of humour. After the game where we got eviscerated by 42 points, what's the first thing he says in the press conference? Is that the score? Is this the full-time score? Like he could keep the straightest face. I would have hated to have played poker with him. He would have been a nightmare to play cards with. But no, I can guarantee that Sloan knew. He absolutely knew. Jerry Sloan's, from me looking at it going back and watching those games at the time, Sloan's biggest blind spot was the ability to adapt on the fly. His game plans were absolutely outstanding, but he stuck to those game plans. That last play, or the last Utah offense in Game 6 where Jordan comes and steals that ball. Jordan says on there, Utah had run that play a few times. A few is possibly the biggest understatement in the world. Utah ran that play thousands of times for about a decade. So Jordan, he can say he knew that play was coming, and he'd known that play was coming since about 1992. But it was Utah's. It was their pet play. You get a little cross screen with either Stockton or Hornacek or Jeff Malone back in the day, and you get Malone onto the left block into his favourite spot where he can face up. He's got that beautiful lefty drive that he did with the right jab step. It was the setup that they use every single time. So you see it. Hornacek just kind of goes through the motions. He just wanders off. He doesn't even realise that Jordan has left him. Malone certainly didn't realise that Jordan hadn't followed his man. And there's so many just simple things that you can change with that. If these days you wouldn't have a two-man game. You'd have a three-man game out there. You'd have a shooter in the corner and a shooter sort of wing to centre. And that way, if there's a double team from either direction, you've got a three-pointer open. And you open up the other side of the court for cuts. So the play would be different nowadays, but just a simple little change like that, keeping Hornacek in the corner, it means that Malone can see MJ. He knows exactly where he is. And if he doubles, you've got a dead-eye shooter in the corner. If Stockton's man drops down, you've got an even better shooter up on the wing. So Malone gets the chance to essentially go one-on-one. But that's not what Utah did. Utah stuck to their game plan like it was the sacred text. They never really changed what they did. And that was the downfall on that particular play.
I want to talk about sort of the scores. You brought that up. I can't believe some of the games were in the 70s. That's crazy to me. Do you think it's more of a pace issue, or is it guys are playing defense? Because I feel like when I remember and why I loved the NBA growing up is because these guys actually played defense.
Yeah, it's a different sport. It's almost like how they say college coaches struggle in the NBA because it's a different sport. It just looks the same. It's the same with the 90s compared to now. The scores were a lot lower because of the pace, but the pace was a lot lower because the minutes were higher. You couldn't run for 43, 44 minutes for 82 games plus playoffs. Nowadays, but look at Giannis this year, and the Bucks are an unusual case, admittedly, but Giannis played about 30 minutes a game this year. If Giannis was playing, or an MVP, let's say, was playing in 1990 or 1995, they would be playing 42 to 44 minutes a game. I'd stake my kids on it. But it's a different era now. We spoke about the training before, how teams don't train as much. It's all about recovery rather than putting in the miles now. And so because of that, the pace had to be slower. The other side of it was because the illegal defense rules were so stringent, there was literally no zoning. There was none of this hedge and recover. You either double teamed or you didn't. That meant that you had time to run through your sets. So a lot of the sets went into the low post because it was a simple read. If the double team didn't come, you made your move. If it did, you find that person out there to shoot probably an 18-footer rather than a 3. But because of that, the sets ran a lot longer. It wasn't until teams ran. Utah had a wonderful fast break and they scored a lot of points from it. But in the half court, it was all get that shot with about 4 to 6 seconds to go rather than get the shot with 15 seconds to go. D'Antoni really did change the way the NBA was played when he coached the Suns.
Well said. Definitely well said. I have nothing else to add to that. You want to cover one or two more things here?
Yeah, man. The winners and losers. MJ, of course. He gets to narrate his own professional life. Yeah, he can't be anything other than a winner with this. Nostalgia, man. For me, as someone who was growing up, who was a teenager / early 20s when these games were going on, this was just wonderful for me. And to sit there and watch it with my oldest son and to have him experience the stuff that I was experiencing with basketball, it's great. like we said before, Pippen was a huge winner in this, despite what he may think. Phil Jackson came across as really, really controlled and erudite. He was, like I said, he was someone whose backstory explains a lot of the behaviours that he had in the NBA. I always thought he was just a weird cat who happened to understand certain people, but I think he's just so much life experience that he's just very adaptable. Scott Burrell, massive winner.
Yeah.
Massive winner.
Ahmad Rashad, massive winner.
There's no one under the age of 25 who knew who the hell Scott Burrell was, 5 weeks ago. But now, the man's a household name. And people love him. They just go, oh, he's such a nice guy. He's a really good guy. Just smiled through it all, played what he had to play, made the shots he had to make. He's just come across as an absolutely outstanding bloke. Two other people who I think came out of this glowingly, you mentioned Steve Kerr, but also Reggie Miller. On Reggie, and look, he is media trained. You may not like his commentary, but he is media trained. But he was really engaging talking about that conference finals. He was honest. He openly admitted where there were faults. He openly admitted what went well, what the Bulls did wrong. He was one of the more honest people in the whole documentary.
I was actually going to say, I think they really hammered all of the opposing teams. Like, George Karl looks bad, Gary Payton looks bad. I think Reggie Miller is the only guy on another team that looks good in this.
Oh, yeah, and that comes down to Reggie more than anything. I don't know how you could paint Reggie as a bad guy from the way he interviewed. He was outstanding. But I think the person who's come out looking the best is Steve Kerr. He's another one who is quite polished, but he's come across as such a down-to-earth, disaffected, centered human being. And as we know, the man's had a lot go on in his life. He's experienced so much more in his lifetime than you or I will in 5 lifetimes. And he comes across as somebody who is... He could live next door to us. He could just be, Steve from down the street that you have a beer with on a Friday night. He comes across as such a regular, ordinary guy, despite the fact that he's lived this extraordinary life. I think he came out of it looking the best of anyone, including MJ.
And that championship speech was incredible.
Oh, that was superb. That was superb. And considering he would have been doing it with a massive hangover as well, to maintain his composure with that.
Jordan playing the piano, big winner.
Oh, well, I don't know. He didn't play it well, Trey. Ahmad Rashad as a piano teacher, definitely a loser. Isaiah Thomas, I had him as a winner/loser. He's quite clearly come out of this as a bit of an asshole who can't accept the mistakes that he's made in the past, the errors in judgment. But it also reminds people that Isaiah led the only team to beat a prime Jordan, and they did it 3 years in a row. The people, it's almost cemented Isaiah's basketball status, whilst also cementing his arsehole status. So he sort of comes across in a little bit of both camps. A few people who didn't come out of it well. This really hurts to say because, as anybody who's reading my all-alphabet teams knows, I love Clyde Frazier. He's one of my favourite all-time, not basketballers, but basketball people. The man is he's a god to me. And him coming out after Jordan was drafted and saying he has to realise he's not 7 foot tall and can't carry a team to a title, whoops.
Yeah.
Didn't go well. We spoke about Krause. We spoke about some of the opposition, like Ewing, like Payton, like Drexler, who have come out pretty badly from this and undeservedly looking bad.
Not a ton on Ron Harper.
He came out as really petty to me. Yeah, he just came out as just a really sarcastic, petty, almost insecure type. I didn't get the best impression of him from the documentary. Talking about burying the lead, though, Jerry Krause was just absolutely piled upon this entire time. And then at the end, like all great cop dramas or detective dramas, turns out Reinsdorf was the bad guy.
See, that's what I said when we recorded that last podcast. I feel like
you absolutely did.
Yeah,
you dead set nailed it, man. So you're the sort of bloke that I'd hate to watch these detective dramas with, because by the second ad break, you're going, "Oh, it was the butler. The butler did it," and we go, "Oh, great, we've ruined another show."
It just felt like that's how I remembered it, and then because I always follow baseball, and this is how Reinsdorf is.
Yeah, well, exactly. If he didn't have the greatest player of all time, what's to say he would have won any titles with the Bulls? Like, taking it back to the top of the pod, there's every chance that they might have stumbled and fallen before they became a championship team. But when Reinsdorf said, it would be suicide to bring them all back, he literally he made these players monetary figures. He made them assets again, rather than sitting there and going, well, I'm going to pay a lot of money and go for the glory again, which, let's face it, that's the whole idea of owning a sports team. It's not a solid investment as far as dollars and cents goes. You do it for the glory. And he turned down that glory because it was going to cost a lot of money. Like that, I'm astonished at that.
I will give him credit for one thing. He's very good at getting players to take contract extensions that are in his favor. He's very good at that. Oh, yeah. But he will never pay someone market value. The White Sox have had good players forever. The only guys he ever keeps are the ones that take hometown extensions when they're in their 20s, and he extends them for forever.
So he Pippins them.
Yes.
Yeah. On the White Sox, the last player that I can name from the White Sox is probably Frank Thomas.
Very underrated. Never gets the respect he deserves. That guy's a tank.
I remember he had a video game. That's all I remember. That's the extent of my baseball knowledge, everyone. So, Trey, I wanted to ask you, though. You've said it before. Like, I'm in my early 40s. You're mid to late 20s. So I was, a conscious, sentient being when all of this was happening. And you're a little kid. So you wouldn't have the same memories of this from the era that I do. So you're going to take different things out of it. I'm interested to see what you've learned, what perceptions have changed from the start of this series to the end of it for you.
That's a good question. I don't feel like a ton has really changed. The biggest takeaway to me is just the mentality that some of these guys have. Like, you can just see when I grew up, like, I think I was starting to become a teenager. Allen Iverson, he just didn't have it mentally. Like, he was a great scorer and he could do all those things. The guy just didn't have the work ethic. And Tracy McGrady, great talent. Guy never had the work ethic. How many guys had the work ethic of MJ? I just felt like that was a main takeaway. Just these guys coming up. It just never feels like all of them bring it. Most of them don't, to me.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about earlier, that Jordan wasn't just this phenomenal athlete. He was also this phenomenal athlete with an incredible drive, and that manifested itself in good and bad ways. But it's the combination of all of these factors that made Jordan what he is. It's not just that he could jump out of the gym or that he could yell at a teammate. He had all this different stuff going for him, and that's why it's such a tough package. I mean, LeBron, to me, LeBron is second or third greatest of all time. However you want to argue it, I'm not really too fussed. If people say second, I'm cool with that. But he's come the closest. He's the person who has not Jordan's killer mentality, but he's come closest to having that killer mentality on the court outside of one particularly big flame out in 2011. But he's the sort of guy who you can see he works on his game. He comes back with a new skill every season, even in, what are we now, season 18 for LeBron? 17, 18? He still comes back with a different skill every year. He invests millions to keep his body young. He's somebody who does all of the right things. So, and that combined with the fact that he's a physical freak is why he is at the very top of the mountain alongside Kareem and MJ.
See, people always get on me for this. I honestly would rather have Kevin Durant at their primes.
Okay, I'll explain.
To me, it feels like LeBron. See, and it goes back to this MJ thing. If he would have had MJ's killer mentality and he's not leaving finals games with cramps and there's so many series to me where if LeBron was MJ, nobody ate. Like that Mavericks team never wins a title if that's Michael Jordan. That Spurs team that beat him that last year in Miami, that team was washed up beyond washed up. That team had no business winning. Kawhi was good, but Tim Duncan couldn't even move, and Tony Parker couldn't move, and Manu Ginobili didn't have it anymore. That Spurs team that beat LeBron's Heat team at the final time, that team wasn't even good, and he didn't even put up a fight.
Alex is swearing at you right now for talking down his Spurs.
And it's not like I don't care that Kevin Durant joined the Warriors. To me, we saw Kevin Durant and LeBron James go head-to-head in a finals, and I think Durant was the better player, and it wouldn't have mattered what team he was on. Yeah, it helped to have Steph Curry and all that. I think he outperformed on one-on-one. To me, Durant's the best pure scorer in the modern era I've seen, and it just never feels like LeBron gets the most out of what he has. LeBron, to me, looks like he could be the greatest American athlete ever, and it just never feels like there's moments like that one finals game, I forget what year it was, against Golden State. He had it, and he was going to overcome all these great Warriors, and then he just blames J.R. Smith and melts down and just doesn't show up for the rest of the series. I just feel like there's moments like that.
There's some things I agree with him there, in that Durant he's cold-blooded, and he is the best scorer of a generation. He's the best scorer since
exactly
Jordan, really.
And he doesn't get the credit defensively either. He's so long.
No, he's a really good defensive player. I mean, he was getting consideration for, I think it was 2018, he was getting consideration for Defensive Player of the Year.
He can't block any of his shots either.
No, that's such a high release. It's a beautiful shot. But it's really tough to compare LeBron and Durant from that finals, simply because we talk about MJ playing against a bunch of scrubs. There really wasn't a lot on that on those Cavs teams outside of LeBron and Kyrie. I mean, Kevin Love was he was cast aside essentially. They didn't make the best use of him, and then you're relying on Tristan Thompson.
But I feel like that's LeBron's fault. Like, we can say whatever we want about Kevin Durant, but he chose the Warriors. LeBron chose his destinations. To me, the surrounding talent should never be an excuse anymore. LeBron chose his destinations. He chose the Miami Heat. And when he had better talent, he still found a way to lose to those Mavericks teams. That team was not good. The Mavericks were way better back in the day.
He absolutely choked against the Mavs. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time,
I never feel like Durant had the better team and lost.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, look, you talked about. Well, that's a really good comparison. When LeBron had the better team against Durant in a finals, LeBron won. When Durant had the better team against LeBron in a finals, Durant won. We forget that Miami did beat Durant in one of those finals.
Yeah, and he was also a puppy dog. He was, 21, 22?
Yeah, he was. But at the same time, a cold-blooded killer is a cold-blooded killer. Guys, Durant didn't play badly in those finals. I still think LeBron is the better player. And look,
I just think it's crazy. I think it's crazy that it's not even a comparison. It needs to be.
It is. Yeah, I think it is. And the thing that's going to decide whether it's an all-time comparison, because remember, in those finals in 2017, I think.
I'm so bad with years.
Yeah, I think the 17 was the first one that Durant won with the Dubs. Everybody talked about the passing of the torch. Has Durant passed LeBron as the best player in the league? And at that stage, he probably had. But as far as all time, and this is where the Achilles injury might rob us of this, LeBron LeBron's tail of his career, again, most people are done by, as far as their prime, by 32, 33. LeBron is, in some people's eyes, the MVP this season at the age of 35 and shows no.
Oh, he's going to get the longevity over him. That's not a doubt. Yeah, I'm talking about prime years in the smack dab when these guys were at their best. I would take Durant.
Yeah, I wouldn't have an argument with that. I'd take LeBron, but I don't have a problem with taking Durant. It's like choosing one diamond over another. They're both really, really good.
I find it crazy that nobody even tries to argue Durant, though. That's what I find crazy.
I think that in 2 or 3 years, if Durant can age gracefully, and if he didn't have the Achilles tear, I think he was going to age gracefully. He's the ideal stretch four. People talk about Robert Horry as the first stretch four. I mean, Durant is basically the mega Horry. A 37-year-old Durant will be doing twice of what Robert Horry was as a 28-year-old. He's just perfect for that role, but will the Achilles rob him of his ability to get to the bucket? Will he become a 37-year-old Durant now? Or will we get another 2 or 3 years of prime Durant so that we can really start making career comparisons with LeBron? Without the Achilles injury, I think that would have been the case. With an Achilles injury, Trey, you just don't know.
It's bad. I'm a little nervous for him.
Yeah. And look, he's the centerpiece of my fantasy keeper team, keeper league. So I've got him and Harden as my two main guys. So I really need Durant to come back and perform. I want to win a bloody title. So not that it's all about me, which it really is. We've gone off topic there, haven't we? We're supposed to be talking about The Last Dance.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be working right now.
Well, mate, I've got one final thought on this whole 10 episode.
All right.
If there's a too long didn't read for this, if you couldn't be bothered and you just wanted to read a summary of it, it's this. It became personal for me. Because that phrase could be put into just about any section of any of the 10 episodes. It became personal for me. Every person that was on there, MJ had a bloody gripe with.
Can't disagree with that. I love the killer mentality. That's how I am. I hold grudges forever, even over the dumbest shit. So I can relate to it.
So I'm never leaving Vendetta, am I? I leave and go right for Bleacher Report.
Don't even start.
There's like Jared Prosser nudes on the internet, and suddenly we know who's put them up there.
All right, Jared, this was fun. I got to work, unfortunately, but we went over an hour here. Good podcast.
Yep. Well, I enjoyed this, mate, and I enjoyed the series. If anybody hasn't watched it yet, I know there's friends of mine who have been waiting for all 10 episodes to come out so they can binge it.
Nah.
And I think it's too much to take in as a binge watch. There's so much going on in all of this. You need to break it down. The 2 hours, the 2 hour brackets worked really well. But for those of you who haven't watched it, please get out and do it. Then go back and listen to our pod from a couple of weeks ago. Then listen to this one. And you can decide whether we're absolute mavens who understood all of this or whether we're absolute dropkicks who know nothing.
And once the NBA returns, hopefully it will, we can have Jared on more podcast episodes, maybe break down the playoffs or whatever. So we can have Jared on whenever.
You mean we can talk about real games?
Hopefully. I think that's the goal.
That was a thing. I can't wait, man. I really can't wait. I'm missing basketball so much.
Same. All right, Jared, I got to go. This was fun. Appreciate it.
Man, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your time, Trey.
Yep. Thank you guys for listening to That's Some Cheese, and we will see you next time.
You know what really grinds my gears? You, America. Fuck you, Diane.